Upon entering Haven Valley Memorial Hospital, 8 vicious motorcycle riders believed they had discovered easy prey in a 68-year-old night shift nurse. They were unaware that Eleanor Harper was not your typical nurse. She had 3 Purple Hearts, 25 years of classified operations experience, and was a decorated Special Forces combat medic. By dawn, their leader would be confronted with a revelation that would alter everything, and the Red Serpent's motorcycle gang would be brutally taught a lesson about choosing the wrong victim. This is the tale of how a group of infamous bikers mistreated the wrong nurse and how the bravery of one woman changed a whole community. Tell us where you're tuning in from before we resume. Additionally, if this tale resonates with you, please make sure to subscribe, as I have something very special in store for you tomorrow. Long shadows were cast along the silent corridors by the fluorescent lights of Haven Valley Memorial's night shift. Due to decades of habit, Eleanor Harper's footsteps were almost silent as she went between patient rooms with practiced efficiency. Her silver hair was tied back in a tidy bun at the age of 68. She was calm, compassionate, and unremarkable, exactly what most people expected a night nurse to be. They failed to observe how she always positioned herself with clear sight lines to all entrances and exits, and how her eyes were always scanning her surroundings. Mrs. Henderson's painkillers need to be changed. The young resident on duty, Emily Taylor, came over holding a patient chart. We could, I thought. Eleanor's gaze flicked to the parking lot and heard the distant sound of motorcycles. It would have been a strange sound at 2 in the morning 3 weeks ago. It was starting to become an unwanted pattern. Start with 5 milligrams, Eleanor said calmly, but her mind was already figuring out angles and distances to the closest safe places. Be mindful of respiratory depression. She has an opioid sensitivity. Intentionally revving motorcycles reverberated through the hospital's silent hallways as the noise level increased. As Emily took notes in the chart, her hands shook a little. For the 3rd time this week, they're back. With the same exact actions that had earlier saved lives under intense fire, Eleanor carried on with her rounds, checking IVs and changing monitors. As the bike engines roared closer, her patient, Mr. Collins, woke up from his slumber. It's quite noisy outside. Dr. James Wilson emerged from the doorway, his normally assured manner tense. Eleanor, may I say something? Wilson paced behind his desk in his office. 3 motorcycles were circling the parking lot through the window, their riders donning the characteristic Red Serpent patches that had come to represent terror in Haven Valley. The boards in question, Wilson said, stroking his graying hair. These motorcycle riders, the Red Snakes, are now doing more than just making noise. Last week, 2 nurses resigned. Admissions of patients are declining. After dusk, people are scared to visit the hospital. As she had always done, Eleanor stood at parade rest. James, what do you want me to do about it? Nothing. That's precisely what I'm saying. Avoid interacting with them. Security is pointless. They're too afraid to go near them. Police claim that they are powerless in the absence of concrete proof of wrongdoing. He let out a deep sigh. To keep safe, I need my most seasoned nurse. Don't do anything, you swear to me. Not necessary. Eleanor's lips were touched by the ghost of a smile. Define necessary. A smash reverberated from the hallway before Wilson could reply, and then there was the sound of harsh laughter. 3 bikers were standing over a fallen food cart with its contents strewn all over the floor when they came out of the office. The biggest of them, a massive man with Brutus tattoos over his knuckles, was purposefully using his boot to grind jello into the tiles. The young volunteer who had been moving the cart was sneered at by him. You had better tidy that up, my love. Eleanor moved ahead with deliberate yet slow steps. At 8 o'clock, visiting hours ended. When the elderly nurse spoke to them, the bikers turned, obviously amused. Their commander, a slender man with icy eyes and a salt and pepper beard, grinned icily. Well, have a look at what we have. Grandma, aren't you up beyond your bedtime? He pointed to the third motorcyclist, Axel, a wiry man with anxious eyes. Described the current situation to Nurse Ratched. Axel stepped closer menacingly, but Eleanor remained motionless, her eyes alert and piercing. Every detail was noted, including their postures, placements, and the faint bulges that signaled the presence of concealed weapons. Axel hissed, "Hospitals under new management. Security services are now offered by Red Vipers. Make sure your administration is aware of that, or else the night shift could become hazardous." Eleanor calmly retorted, "The only danger to my patients is 3 men who obviously weren't brought up with good manners. I can show you out now, or you can go on your own. You have an option." Brutus's chuckle echoed along the hallway. "Viper, did you hear that? Granny will take us out." The leader, Viper, now took a closer look at Eleanor. A warning and instincts sharpened by years of street fighting were sparked by something in her posture and the way she carried herself. Unable to accept that this old nurse may actually be a threat, he forced the emotion away. He ordered the young volunteer, shivering and squeezed against the wall, to clean up this mess. Take it as a reminder that it won't be simply a food cart the next time. Brutus purposefully shouldered past Eleanor, or attempted to, as they turned to go. She was no longer standing where she had been for some reason. He lost his equilibrium due to his velocity and staggered into the wall. As if nothing had occurred, Eleanor was already assisting the volunteer in picking up trays that had been left lying around by the time he recovered. "Have you noticed?" Axel began, but Viper interrupted him with a jagged motion. "Come on. Later, there will be plenty of time to deal with obstinate nurses." Dr. Wilson came out of his doorway, transfixed in place as their bootsteps reverberated away. "What were you thinking, Eleanor? They're dangerous men." "So am I," she said quietly as she carried on tidying up the debris. "They simply aren't aware of it yet." Daniel, Eleanor's son, was waiting in the parking lot as she wrapped up her shift later that morning. At 40, he had inherited more than just his parents' good looks, with his mother's calculating eyes and his father's powerful features. He shouted out, "Mom," and sank into a step next to her. "We must discuss these riders. It's not secure." Eleanor remembered the little kid who used to worry while she was deployed, and she smiled at him. "Remember what I told you about bullies, Daniel? They take kindness for weakness," he instinctively responded. "But these aren't bullies from the schoolyard, Mom. New England communities have been overrun by the Red Vipers. They're organized, violent, and utterly unprepared for what they're going to discover about this specific nurse." With the same quiet assurance that had once led Special Forces medical squads, Eleanor broke the silence. "How about breakfast now? I have pancakes on my mind." Neither of them spotted the motorcyclist who was silently talking into a phone while observing from the shadows as they drove away. "There's a problem with that nurse, boss. How did she move? I've never seen someone that age move like that, but Brutus believes it was all luck." Viper's voice broke over the phone, "Perhaps you should stop being paranoid about little old ladies. Tonight, we demonstrate to Haven Valley Memorial the consequences of disrespecting the Red Vipers. Bring everyone in. This nurse needs to learn her role." The stress of the night was not much alleviated by the morning shift at Haven Valley Memorial. In the staff break room, Eleanor sat diligently recording her patient notes while listening with one ear to the anxious talks going on around her. The young nurses gathered in corners, exchanging notes on the safest routes for their commutes and anecdotes about Red Serpent sightings. Last night, they were in Mike's diner. "Just walked in, ate without paying, and dared anyone to say something." Sarah Peterson, the ER-charged nurse, murmured to her coworkers. "Mike has been here for 30 years and has never experienced any issues." For a moment, Eleanor's pen hesitated over her documents. It was a recognizable pattern. She had witnessed similar strategies in Iraqi and Afghani areas. Make an impression, instill terror, and split the community. The environment was the only difference. Emily, who always exuded joy, walked over to Eleanor's table. "While I was revising your personnel file, Mrs. Harper, I discovered something intriguing." She put a faded newspaper clipping from 20 years ago on the table. In the picture, a younger Eleanor was seen tending to injured soldiers while under fire while wearing war fatigues. "Combat medic receives Silver Star for heroic actions," was the headline. Emily whispered, "I was wondering why it wasn't mentioned in your employment history." Eleanor folded the clipping carefully. "Emily, some experiences are inappropriate for nursing resumes. Relevant medical experience is required. There may be too many questions after 25 years of war medicine." Police Chief Michael Davidson arrived, his face tense with annoyance, interrupting their talk. "Have a moment, Eleanor." Davidson didn't hold back when speaking in the hospital garden, away from anxious onlookers. "They're becoming more audacious. This morning, 3 businesses received protection demands. No one wants to testify. In certain places, even my own officers are reluctant to answer calls." Eleanor noted, afraid of retaliation, recalling such anxieties in conflict areas. "Viper is intelligent," Davidson added. "Keeps things just below the threshold at which we could attract significant federal notice. However, this hospital situation is unique. He's obsessed with you. It has been reported that he is inviting members from other chapters." Eleanor kept a straight face, but her mind was already working out the numbers. "How many? By tonight, there might be 20 or 30 bikes. I can't tell you to get involved, Eleanor, but..." He paused. "I've seen your service record informally. The hospital's response time could be slower than normal tonight if something were to happen." Outside the Red Serpent's unofficial headquarters, an abandoned warehouse they had taken as their own, Daniel Harper was sitting in his car across town. Police reports, property records, and sporadic intelligence regarding the gang's activities were all visible on his laptop. He hadn't wasted 20 years of military intelligence. His cell rang. His mother texted him. "Pancakes for breakfast tomorrow?" Daniel grinned in spite of his anxiety. When she had been deployed as a child, it was their old code. Pancakes indicated that she was about to take a risk but was sure of the result. He was about to respond when he noticed movement at the warehouse. 2s and 3s of bikes were coming in. Standing at the door, Viper engaged in heated conversations with each newcomer. The storm was brewing. Eleanor returned to the hospital and carefully inspected the goods in different storage rooms. Not medical supplies, but things that might be used for other things. Using the same level of care she had previously applied to evaluate military aid stations, she documented the locations of structural weak areas, maintenance equipment, and fire extinguishers. "You have something to be ready for." Emily stood in a doorway, observing Eleanor. "It's important to understand your surroundings in order to provide appropriate patient care," Eleanor said coolly. "Did they teach you that in Special Forces?" Eleanor looked at her youthful co-worker. "Emily, being really prepared for violence is sometimes the best defense against it. It's going to be difficult tonight. I must know. Are you prepared to deal with every situation that arises?" Emily was about to reply when Sarah rushed into the room. "There are a minimum of 15 motorcycles in the parking lot. Viper is insistent on speaking with the hospital's management." Trying to seem calm, Dr. Wilson's voice crackled over the intercom. "Please report to secure areas if you are not an essential staff member. There are now security procedures in place." Eleanor carefully shut the door to the supply room. "Send your patients to the inner rooms, Emily. Sarah, follow the emergency lockdown protocols that we talked about. It's time to demonstrate to these lads the distinction between genuine strength and intimidation. It took us a long time to prepare and tell this story, so please subscribe to our channel if you find it entertaining, it means a lot to us. Let's return to the narrative." As more motorcycles arrived, the roar of motorcyclists outside became louder. With a menacing grin on his face, Viper stood in the middle of his assembling force. He told his workers it was time to teach this hospital the value of respect. Locate the nurse and set an example. He had no idea that far more dangerous guys had undervalued Eleanor Harper for decades. She moved with economy and precision as she changed into new scrubs. The same manner she used to get ready for battle. The distinction was that she wasn't fighting for unidentified military goals this time. She was standing up for her neighborhood, her hospital, and everyone who had ever been the victim of bullying by men who mistakenly believed that cruelty was a sign of strength. The passageways were filled with deep shadows as the sun descended above Haven Valley Memorial. Both sides readied themselves for a showdown that would alter everything in the encroaching darkness. Eleanor was aware that the Red Vipers would be taught a crucial lesson about evaluating individuals based solely on their appearance by dawn. How many of them would require medical care before that lesson became clear was the only question. She listened to Daniel's voicemail from earlier. There are at least 30 bikes traveling into Haven Valley, according to satellite imagery, Mom. Just keep in mind that you are no longer in the field, regardless of what you have planned. It was 8:45 p.m. when Eleanor looked at her watch. Thunder rolled across the valley in the distance, or maybe it was the sound of more motorcyclists coming. An encounter that would demonstrate the extent of the harm a combat medic could inflict without ever breaking her promise to, first, do no harm would soon accompany the start of the night shift. Sarah came over one last time, her voice a little shaky. "Are you certain about this, Eleanor? Letting security handle things is not a sign of weakness." Eleanor calmly replied that security had already left. They made up their minds. Mine was built in even harsher conditions than this one a long time ago. Proceed to assist Emily with the patients now. I'll take care of our guests. Heavy boot steps reverberated across the hallway, and the elevator dinged. Eleanor continued to complete her papers as usual while standing at the nurse's station. However, decades of fighting experience had raised her awareness to high alert behind her composed appearance. She could hear them moving into position, trying to encircle her. Amateur strategies that, in any actual combat scenario, would have resulted in their death. Viper's voice echoed down the corridor, well. Grandma seemed to be working late once more. Eleanor remained absorbed on her paperwork. Even though I doubt any of you are here to visit patients, visiting hours still end at 8. Axel and 3 other riders stopped one end of the tunnel, while Brutus's enormous frame emerged at the other. They believed they had her imprisoned. That's what she led people to think. Viper kept coming closer, you know. "Nurse Harper, I've been checking up on you. It's an interesting thing. There is a significant void in your past. 25 years of. What precisely?" Eleanor looked up now, meeting his gaze with the same cool composure that she had formerly used to confront warlords. "You already know if you've done your homework. Are you certain you want to learn the truth firsthand?" The hospital lights flickered and thunder roared outside. Eleanor's hand went to her pocket, where a plain roll of medical tape was waiting in that fleeting darkness. She had long since discovered that anything could be used as a weapon, and these boys were going to discover that the most dangerous person in a room isn't usually the one who threatens others. Final opportunity. Eleanor spoke with the same composed authority that she had displayed while leading medical units. "Leave. Look for another town to frighten." The hall echoed with Brutus's laughter. "Grandma, or what? Will you take a sponge bath for us?" Eleanor stayed still, her gaze following every little detail. Axel's anxious hand next to his jacket, Brutus's weight distribution, and the way 2 younger gang members kept staring at the exits. She had learned to interpret all the telltale signs in conflict zones. "Do you see what I see?" Vipers came around. "I observe a nurse who is unsure of her role. Boys, teach her the consequences of disobeying the Red Vipers." Brutus was the first to move, rushing forward with unexpected speed thanks to his enormous body. However, Eleanor had fought on 3 continents and treated men twice his size. With fluid ease, she moved aside, her palm locating pressure spots on his outstretched arm that caused him to stumble into the nurse's station. As though delivering a medical lecture, she taught pressure point manipulation in a professional manner. There are 72 susceptible nodes in the human body that can become incapacitated without sustaining irreversible harm. She was rushed from behind by Axel and another motorcyclist. Eleanor moved with economy and precision. When the medical tape materialized in her hands, Axel was abruptly restrained to his partner, and their combined strength propelled them into a supply cart. What on earth? Vipers's voice now held real bewilderment. Grab her. Eleanor had placed herself precisely where she wanted to be, but two more bikers moved forward more cautiously. In one fluid action, a fire extinguisher slid off the wall, revealing a tactical screen that would have pleased her former Special Forces colleagues. Emily stood in the safe nurse's station and observed through the confusion. Everything was being recorded on her phone. She muttered to Sarah, "Oh my God. Have you seen how she simply..." Standing between four disabled bikers, Eleanor calmly yelled, "Training beats brute force. It's something that Special Forces teaches you early on." Vipers lost his cool. "Extraordinary forces? Which type of nurse do you work as?" Using the attacker's own momentum to send him falling, Eleanor ducked another awkward attack and responded, "The kind who spent 25 years treating wounds in combat zones. The kind that won a silver star and 3 Purple Hearts. The type that understands precisely how much force is necessary to incapacitate without causing irreversible harm." Brutus was standing again, massaging his arm where a cluster of nerves had been struck by Eleanor's accurate blow. "There's a problem with this, boss." Daniel's voice rang out loudly from the shadows at the end of the hallway. 5 more bikes are coming from the east, according to the satellite, Mom. You might want to finish this. Eleanor gave a small nod. It's time to wrap up this stage of the conflict. She was prepared as the Brutus charged once again. She moved with the fluidity of water. Precise use of force was shaped by decades of battle experience. A huge motorcyclist was face down in a matter of seconds, his hands bound with his own bandana. Interesting tidbit about battle medicine. Eleanor, still holding on to the Brutus, spoke to the other gang members. "We study every possible method that the human body might malfunction, not to inflict harm but to avoid it. Even so, the information is reciprocal." Viper had retreated, his former bluster giving way to mounting anxiety. "This isn't feasible. All you are is a nurse." "I am both," said Eleanor. "A combat veteran who can make you wish I hadn't, or a nurse who can save your life. You have an option." More bikes were pulling into the parking lot, which was lit by lightning through the windows. However, something had changed. As their leaders and most resilient fighters were defeated by an elderly nurse, the newcomers resisted. "Do you believe that this makes a difference?" Now Viper's voice was filled with frantic rage. "This town is ours. What's coming cannot be stopped by one nurse. Examine your surroundings." Eleanor pointed to the surveillance footage that Emily had confirmed was being captured. "Every threat, attack, and event that took place here is recorded. Chief Davidson will have all he needs to call in federal authorities tomorrow, even though he may be conveniently gone tonight." Sarah came out of the gated area with many live broadcasts on her phone. Hospital cameras are not the only ones. Every police agency in 3 counties is receiving a simulcast of everything. Once more, Daniel's voice echoed along the hallway. "Mom, the broadcasts are being picked up by local news stations. Consider making a strong closing move." Eleanor spoke straight to the other gang members. "The Red Vipers overcome loneliness and dread. Tonight is the last day of that. This will be seen in every hospital and town you have terrorized. They will be able to stand up to you." Viper's angry face twisted. Eleanor moved more quickly than anyone her age, but he still reached into his jacket. Ought to have been capable of doing so in a single, smooth move. He was disarmed by her. The switch viper fell to the ground with a clang. Improved reflexes. After 25 years of military medicine, she explained the negative effects in a professional manner. Incredibly helpful in an emergency. The other members of the gang retreated. The windows broke their former confidence. When the police cars eventually came, they could see their lights flashing. It's not over yet. Officers started to enter the premises, and vipers spat. Don't forget, red vipers. We're not forgiving. I don't either. Eleanor gently responded, starting to massage Brutus's shoulder, which had been momentarily paralyzed by her accurate blow. I made an oath to help others, though, unlike you. Even those who aren't worthy. When you're planning for whatever happens next, keep that in mind. Chief Davidson came in, looking about with a professional curiosity. I guess I missed a little thrill. Does anyone require medical care? Eleanor continued her treatment and reported nothing serious. Only a few controlled joint manipulations and pressure point treatments. There won't be any long-term harm, but they will be painful tomorrow. Emily came up to Eleanor with wide eyes as the cops started to process the scene. It was. Never have I. Where did you get all of the information? Eleanor responded, updating her patient files as though nothing out of the ordinary had occurred. Combat medicine is more than just treating wounds. Knowing exactly how to create harm can sometimes be the key to preventing it. Eleanor sensed that this was just the beginning amidst the confusion of police statements and medical evaluations. The humiliation tonight would necessitate a response from the Red Vipers, who had chapters all over New England. She sensed something else had started, though, as she saw her hospital personnel stand up, dread giving way to resolute resolve. Daniel, with his laptop showing multiple surveillance streams, joined her at the nurse's station. They will strike back. I assume you are aware of that. Naturally, Eleanor quietly answered. Now, however, everyone is aware that they are not unbeatable. Fear is only effective when a person feels isolated. Tonight, that came to an end. The storm was over outside, but the clouds were getting darker. There would be more men and more fighting when the Red Vipers returned. However, they would discover that Haven Valley had changed, its residents realizing that one brave individual may encourage others to stand up. Eleanor Harper got ready for the remainder of her shift by adjusting her scrubs. There were wounds to heal, patients to care for, and a community to safeguard. Although the battle was won, the struggle for the soul of Haven Valley was only getting started. As Eleanor completed tending to the remaining wounds from the night's altercation, dawn painted Haven Valley Memorial in gentle golden light. Brutus flinched as she encircled his shoulder, his bluster giving way to silent reflection. He murmured softly, averting her gaze, "You could have done worse. Might have harmed us." Eleanor said, "That would have been against my oath," and fastened the bandage. As a soldier and as a nurse. How much harm you choose not to inflict can sometimes send a stronger message than how much harm you are capable of doing. Viper strode in front of his gathered officers in an abandoned warehouse across town that had been used as the Red Serpent's makeshift headquarters. His face was black with humiliation and anger. He spat out one nurse. We appeared feeble because of one elderly nurse. Already, the other chapters are speaking. It's our reputation on the line. Axel gingerly spoke up while tending to his wounded ribs. Maybe we should back off, boss. She's not your typical woman. The way she walked. Viper slammed a chair against the wall and stopped talking. All of the chapters in New England are calling me. They're doubting my ability to lead. This is no longer about a single nurse. The goal is to demonstrate to the world what occurs when someone opposes the Red Vipers. Dr. Wilson had called an emergency board meeting at the hospital. Eleanor sat quietly while department heads and administrators discussed what had happened the night before. According to the head of public relations, the video has gone viral. It is being referred to as the night shift warrior by local news outlets. The national media is contacting us. This has nothing to do with publicity, Eleanor said. It concerns our employees and patients' safety. This will not be tolerated by the Red Vipers. They are unable to pay for it. Wilson bent over. What do you propose? They will intensify. Bring in additional participants. Make an effort to regain control. We must be ready. Emily stormed into the conference room as if to make her argument clear. People with ties to the hospital are their focus. The vehicle owned by Dr. Roberts was damaged. Threats were spray-painted on Sarah's residence. Chief Davidson showed up with more reports. As he arranged pictures on the conference table, his expression was somber. Overnight, 3 businesses owned by hospital board members caught fire. They have a message to convey. This is well planned and coordinated. Other criminal groups are being asked to do favors for the Red Vipers. Daniels had security footage from across town on his laptop. Weapons are being moved into the neighborhood. According to my federal law enforcement connections, related gangs in 3 states are exhibiting odd movement patterns. Using the same tactical awareness she had previously used to evaluate battle zones, Eleanor examined the pictures. They're not merely plotting retaliation. They are attempting to use the entire town as an example. People from the neighborhood have started to congregate outside the hospital. In support, not in terror. As a human barrier between the hospital and any resurgent threats, local business owners, past patients, and regular citizens stood watch. Emily noted, observing the expanding gathering, people are sick of being scared. You demonstrated to them that standing up was doable. An unknown number buzzed on Eleanor's phone with a message. It's your turn, nurse. We're going to demonstrate to Haven Valley what true fear looks like tonight. Eleanor spent time with her employees at the hospital cafeteria. Yesterday's fear had vanished, to be replaced by resolute determination. They're observing us, she said, describing tactics she had picked up in war areas. Testing responses and searching for flaws. We must demonstrate to them that there are more than one nurse in this hospital. We're all standing here together. Sarah gave out emergency reaction plans. We have been trained by Eleanor. We no longer only work in healthcare. Our community is defending itself. Chief Davidson brought fresh intelligence with him. They're congregating in several places. At least 50 bikes were tallied by my cops. Vipers requested all of his favors. It has been reported that his bosses have taken this personally. Keeping people afraid is the foundation of their entire power structure. Then we demonstrate to them something more powerful than fear, Eleanor said. She looked across at Daniel. What is our situation tactically? Daniel flitted his fingers across his laptop. I have drone footage of where they congregate. They are preparing a multifaceted, coordinated attack. However, we have something unexpected for them. We have the support of the community. As the day went on, more people showed up to the hospital. Police officers who weren't on duty offered their services as security. Veterans from the area shared their knowledge. Former patients even showed up to keep watch. Dr. Wilson was conflicted as he observed the preparations. You were the most qualified nurse I had ever seen, which is why I hired you. I never thought we'd require your other abilities. Eleanor answered, looking at emergency supplies in battle medicine. You discover that mending is more than merely bandaging injuries. Sometimes the goal is to stop them. Showing individuals they don't have to be victims is sometimes the goal. Viper assembled his expanded force as dusk drew near. Dozens of motorbikes roared through the warehouse. He spoke to his gathered gang tonight. We remind everyone why the Red Vipers are feared. That nurse will regret ever leaving the combat zone by dawn. However, Eleanor Harper strode through the hospital hallways with the same calm assurance that had led her through the medical stations on the battlefield. She has been rescuing lives under fire for 25 years. She was now protecting a community's soul as well as a structure. She informed her assembled colleagues that they believe the hospital is the target. However, we're not merely guarding a structure. They've frightened every town, and we're proving that fear only works when people let it to. The sun was sinking over Haven Valley outside. Both sides readied themselves for what lay ahead in the encroaching darkness. However, something had changed. The Red Vipers were accustomed to using intimidation to instill dread and assaulting solitary prey. They would have to deal with something else tonight. A community came together under the leadership of a nurse who had dedicated her life to teaching others that solidarity, rather than walls or weapons, is the best defense. Eleanor looked at her timepiece. 7:45 p.m. The night shift would start less than an hour later. However, this change would be distinct. Before long, the Red Vipers would discover that they had done more than pick a quarrel with a single nurse. No amount of intimidation could defeat the courage they had evoked in the community. Recall that she gave instructions to the assembly of community members and former patients who had assembled in the cafeteria. We are not thugs. We are defending a medical facility. Every action and every posture has a single objective: protecting our patients. At 8:15 p.m., the first indication of problems appeared. The riders of 3 motorcycles threw things through the reinforced windows as they roared past the emergency entrance. However, they discovered ready defenders rather than shattered glass and fear. Installed hours earlier by local contractors who had refused to be intimidated any longer, security screens were put into position. The emergency radio system crackled Daniel's voice. The initial wave is distracting. Larger groups can be seen approaching from the north and east on the satellite. They're attempting to divert our focus. Using the same efficiency she used at field hospitals, Eleanor navigated the hospital's hallways. Sarah, please relocate the patients in critical care to the inner rooms. Put Protocol 3 into action, Emily. They're using common intimidation techniques. Investigate defenses, cause mayhem, and take advantage of fear. Outside, more motorcycles showed up, their engines purposefully roaring through the hospital parking lot. But they ran into organized resistance rather than simple prey. Off-duty police officers were visible as community members held their ground, their phones documenting every action. The emergency entrance was approached by Chief Davidson's cruiser. Eleanor, there have been stories of Red Vipers attacking the residences of board members. They are attempting to exert pressure on the hospital's management. Eleanor checked the reinforced doors and responded as she had expected. What is the status of the federal task force? Establishing a case, but bureaucracy is time-consuming. Tonight we're on our own. From the west wing came a crash and then the sound of glass splintering. Before the echo subsided, Eleanor was on her way, her strides quick and quiet. When she discovered Axel and 2 other motorcyclists trying to break through a side entry, their astonishment changed to shock upon realizing who she was. You still haven't learned? The calm authority Eleanor had used in combat triage units was still evident in her voice. However, I see that this time you're attempting a different door. Your technique needs improvement, but your adaptation is good. Axel held up a frightening chain, but his hands showed how uneasy he was. Nurse, you can't be everywhere at once. Targets are being hit by the Red Vipers throughout the town. Eleanor said, that's where you're wrong. Several people of the community appeared behind her from key locations. We are no longer only protecting the hospital. It is Haven Valley's self-defense. His strike teams were reporting to Viper more and more irately from across town. There was organized opposition to every attempt at intimidation. Together, the store owners refused to be divided and taken away. Coordinated response networks had replaced neighborhood watches. They seem to know where we will strike. A motorcyclist reported via his cell phone. They were trained by that nurse, or whatever. Viper hit the wall with his phone. We stopped being courteous after that. Bring in the heavier crew. This town needs to see what true violence looks like. Daniel communicated with his network of contacts back at the hospital. They're switching strategies, Mom. Vehicles transporting heavy equipment are reportedly approaching Haven Valley, according to interstate police. These days, they are more than just motorcyclists. With the same tactical awareness that had saved her life in combat zones, Eleanor analyzed the information. They're desperate, which is why they're intensifying. They only know fear, and it's no longer effective. Emily came out with new information gleaned from her social media accounts. Real-time reports of Red Serpent sightings are being shared. Every effort at intimidation is being videotaped and documented. They are no longer able to function in the dark. The emergency radio at the hospital crackled once more. There are several cars coming from County Road 7. Substantial reinforcements. Now, they're not even attempting to be nuanced. In the emergency room, Eleanor assembled her core group of people. We had been getting ready for this. They will attempt something significant, something that cannot be disregarded. It is the foundation of their entire control system. Eleanor had educated them to utilize combat-style equipment, which Sarah delivered in place of regular hospital emergency medical kits. How about the patients? Eleanor reassured her that we have evacuation procedures in place in case things get very terrible. But keep in mind that the hospital is no longer the only focus of this. More people rise each time they get out of hand. When people face fear collectively, it loses its potency. They could see more bikes coming in through the security cameras, but something was different. These were not the typical members of the Red Vipers. These riders moved with the accuracy of soldiers. Their bikes were altered for purposes other than mere intimidation. Expert enforcers, Daniel noted glumly. When they have to set an example for others, they bring these men in. Mom, things are going to get ugly. Eleanor looked at her timepiece. 9:30 p.m. Excellent. Let them reveal who they really are to everyone. Every violent act and threat just serves to support our claims. They are powerless. They simply fear that Haven Valley may lose its hold on them. Chief Davidson came back with a new look of worry on his face. These new actors have ties to major crime organizations, Eleanor. The Red Vipers are no longer only engaged in local conflict. It affects their entire regional power structure. Eleanor, who was observing the assembling force via the security cams, responded, then it's time they learned what real strength looks like. Not the ability to harm others, but the ability to unite against those who do. The sound of motorcyclists outside had grown into a continuous thunderclap. However, there was no fear or panic within the hospital. Employees made deliberate movements. Volunteers refused to back down. Eleanor Harper was in the middle of it all, getting ready to prove to the Red Vipers that they weren't just picking a quarrel with one nurse. They had questioned the spirit of the entire community. One last crackle came from the radio. They're taking their places. Several points of entrance. It's this. Eleanor spoke to her gathered supporters. Recall your training. Keep in mind our purpose. Above all, keep in mind that after tonight, every town that lives in their shadow will understand that terror only works when we allow it to. The first concerted attack started when the hospital lights flickered, as if in reaction. However, the Red Vipers were going to discover that their typical intimidation techniques were nothing like attacking a hospital that was protected by a combat medic and a united community. Everything would change tonight. For every town that had ever been terrified by men who mistakenly believed that brutality was strength, not simply Haven Valley. Smoke canisters rolled across the floor, shattering glass. Eleanor, however, had anticipated this. As soon as the sprinkler system came on, the smoke was dispersed and emergency ventilation began. They're attempting to cause mayhem. The radio system picked up Eleanor's voice. Keep your positions in mind. Let them believe it's effective. Expecting to see hospital staff in a panic, the professional enforcers moved information through the smoke. Rather, they came across coordinated opposition. While hospital security procedures went as anticipated, community volunteers occupied key positions. The east entrance was breached. From his position of command, Daniel reported movement patterns of 6 hostiles in a military way. These guys aren't the same, Mom. Private security, perhaps, or former military. As the enforcers planned their attack, Eleanor observed via the surveillance feeds. Their actions supported Daniel's conclusion. These were not your typical gangsters. These were professionals with training. She told her colleagues to concentrate on containment. Avoid direct interaction. Recall our discussion about choke spots and defensive positions. Viper's voice echoed from outside via a megaphone. Nurse, this is your last opportunity. Either come out and face the future, or we'll start using people as examples. Sarah and 3 volunteers stopped crucial patients' admission to the heart ward. 2 enforcers discovered more than just hospital employees as they attempted to break in. Community people, veterans, and past patients refused to back down. Are you serious about doing this? Sarah spoke steadily. Assault a cardiac unit? That is not a story that even the Red Vipers can tell. The enforcers hesitated because their directives and their professional training conflicted. Eleanor only needed to pause for that minute. She materialized like a ghost behind them. She moved with control and precision. She neutralized both men with clinical efficiency and made a professional remark about how interesting pressure points are. Although I would like not, the same spots we use to treat pain can also create it. Over the radio, Daniel's anxious voice crackled. 3 more cars are approaching, Mom, according to the satellite. Heavy armaments. They are no longer merely attempting to intimidate. They intend to make an impression. With a stern expression, Chief Davidson rushed through a side door. We have issues, Eleanor. Soft targets are being targeted all around the area, including homes, businesses, and anything associated with hospital employees or sympathizers. Eleanor responded, strapping the unconscious enforcers with medical cuffs. That's not their real play. Now, this goes beyond Haven Valley. What do you see, Daniel? 3 states are seeing the mobilization of several chapters. Mom, their entire business collapses if they are unable to keep this under control. Other communities are observing. Everywhere, people are beginning to stand up. Eleanor saw Viper pacing outside through the security cameras, his customary self-assurance faltering. The speedy triumph he had promised his bosses was not being delivered by the professional enforcers. Axel walked warily up to Viper. Boss. Perhaps we ought to retreat and reorganize. This isn't functioning as it should. Viper's reaction exploded. Finally losing control, he grabbed Axel by the throat. Retract. Do you want to inform the organization that a nurse and a few townies beat us? What happens to chapters that exhibit weakness, do you know? When the next attack occurred, Emily was inside communicating with other departments. More glass shattering, more smoke, but this time the familiar roar of automatic rifles chambering could be heard. Every unit returns to its defensive stance. Over the radio, Eleanor's voice stayed composed. They are turning to using overwhelming weaponry to intimidate. They've made a critical misstep, but it's standard terrorist tactics. What went wrong? As she assisted patients in being moved to secure places, Sarah inquired. They believe they are battling a single nurse. They are unaware that they are opposing the desire of a whole community to be fearless. As more enforcers broke through many doorways, the hospital halls reverberated with boot falls, yet every point of entry had been set up. For the defenders, every pathway became a tactical advantage. Daniel's voice had a new urgency, Mom. Now, they receive orders straight from the top. Leaders in the region are observing. Their entire control system begins to fall apart if Viper fails here. Eleanor concluded. Excellent. It's time to demonstrate that to them. Hospital employees weren't the only people the next round of enforcers had to deal with. After years of paying protection money, local business owners now refused to back down. Every act of violence was documented by former victims who testified live. Do you see what's going on? Each defender heard Eleanor's voice. They are revealing who they really are to everyone. Every threat and attack merely supports our claims. They have no actual power. It's merely fear. Furthermore, fear only works when people let it to. Viper made his last error as he watched his meticulously prepared attack collapse. Burn it. He led his remaining troops. Burn everything. Show everyone the consequences of disobeying the Red Vipers. However, while the enforcers took action to comply, an unforeseen circumstance occurred. Brutus moved ahead after witnessing the violence intensify. No, Viper couldn't pass through his huge frame. This is incorrect. Instead than targeting hospitals and innocent people, we should be about respect and territory. The rest of the gang started muttering in agreement. The professional enforcers looked at one another. They knew from their training that this scenario had gotten out of hand. Calm and clear, Eleanor's voice reverberated over the parking lot. You can choose. You all. Remember why you joined, or continue to follow commands that undermine any honor you may have believed you had. Was it to assault medical facilities? To intimidate patients and nurses? Daniel was inside, keeping an eye on the changing dynamics. Something's going on, Mom. The guards are stepping aside. Local chapters are retreating. Viper produced a pistol as he noticed his control eroding. All of you are weak. This is about power, about instilling terror in them. No, Brutus said, with other gang members joining in. You made it to boost your self-esteem and impress your superiors. It needed a nurse to point out how far we had fallen when we became lost. Despite the turmoil, Eleanor's scrubs were immaculate, and her movement still had the lethal grace that befitted decades of fighting expertise as she came from the hospital entrance. Viper, it's over, she whispered quietly. It is visible to your own folks. Fear is weakness masquerading as strength, it is not power. Standing together against those like you who believe that cruelty makes one powerful is what true strength is. The final encounter of the night was coming, but it would not be the one Viper had intended, as police sirens sounded from all directions. He saw a united front of individuals who had found their courage instead of a community hiding in terror, with a nurse at their heart who had dedicated her life to discovering that the best defense against violence wasn't more violence. It was the bravery to oppose it together. The sky of Haven Valley flashed with lightning as Viper dealt with the rising dissension among his own people. His customary measured composure was replaced by desperation as his pistol wavered between Eleanor and Brutus. Everything we constructed, he said in a furious tone. Because of one nurse, you're discarding all the territory and respect. Eleanor took deliberate steps across the parking lot, keeping her gaze fixed on Viper's weapon the entire while. Viper's trigger finger was getting tight, and she had learned to read desperate individuals from her 25 years of military experience. Not because of me, she quietly answered. Because they are recalling their past selves before fear became their sole means of survival. Between Viper and the hospital, Brutus and a few other gang members established a line. As they read the changing dynamics, the professional enforcers started to fade into the background. Daniel? Silently, Eleanor talked into her radio. Status? According to her son, regional authorities are severing relations. They are destroying documents, burning phones, and fragmenting the entire network. Viper has nothing left to lose, though, Mama. Viper shot into the air as if to bolster Daniel's argument. Nobody departs. Do you wish to observe the fate of traitors? To those who don't know what respect is. The parking lot echoed with Eleanor's voice. Speaking to the group of gang members. All of you joined for various reasons. Fraternity. Goal. Defense. But eventually, it turned into a method to demonstrate your strength by harming others. Is that the respect you were hoping for? More bikers joined Brutus's line, moving away from Viper. Staff and community people observed through the hospital windows as the system of power that had terrified them started to fall apart. Davidson, Chief. Eleanor talked into her radio. Do you have your team in place? Awaiting your signal. The 2nd Federal Task Force. Just don't stop him chatting. There was a hint of frenzy in Viper's laughter. Do you think this is the end of it? This will not be tolerated by the organization. Others worse than us will be sent. You have no idea what's going to happen. In fact, Daniel's voice could be heard coming from the hospital door. I'm holding a laptop. Yes, we do. We were tracking money trails while you were concentrating on intimidation. Each and every transaction. Each payment for protection. Every link to bigger illegal businesses. The FBI is currently investigating your superiors. Sarah led a group of community members and employees out of the hospital. Their features were no longer filled with terror. Just willpower. She declared, it's not only Haven Valley. Other medical facilities are rising to the occasion. Other cities. All of your actions here. Every violent effort. It's merely letting folks know they don't need to be scared any longer. At last, Viper's facade broke. The pistol was aimed straight at Eleanor. You. All of this is due to you. Everything can be resolved with a single bullet. Eleanor remained unflinching. She spoke in a businesslike tone. It's almost clinical. 372 battles. People who believed that violence was the solution fired thousands of bullets at me. Are you curious about what I discovered? Eleanor moved before Viper could react. She moved very quickly for her age. She developed her expertise after decades of dealing with life-or-death circumstances. The pistol flew. Viper then discovered that he was face down. As precisely as she used to save lives, she was subdued. I discovered that a gun isn't the most dangerous weapon. She went on. Securing him with insufficient practice. It is the capacity to demonstrate to others that they do not need to live in dread. Chief Davidson led police cruisers that swamped the parking lot. Officers started apprehending gang members. Those who had not already run away or surrendered. Eleanor saw something important. Brutus came over to her. He took off the vest of his Red Serpent. Now what? To everyone who wants something different. Eleanor studied him carefully. That is up to you. The community must be healed. Not tonight only. But after years of being afraid. Perhaps it's time to stop intimidating and start using your strength to defend. Daniel came along. Updates from all across the area are shown on his laptop. Mom. This is something you must see. It's not limited to this place. Other cities. Other medical facilities. Everywhere, people are getting up. The entire network of the Red Serpent is disintegrating. Within the medical facility, Emily was in charge of staff coordination. Addressing minor wounds sustained during the evening. Eleanor. She yelled. You must also observe something else. Across several channels, news coverage was shown on the ER television. The hospital's defense clips. Members of the community standing together. The internal insurrection of the gang was performed repeatedly. It's becoming widely shared. Sarah clarified. Not only the combat. However, the message. About uniting. About not allowing fear to control us. Chief Davidson came over, federal updates on his phone. Eleanor. Do you recall that this was about more than one hospital or nurse? You were correct. The FBI is dismantling similar schemes in 3 states using the evidence from tonight. Viper. Escorted to a police vehicle. Made a last stand of defiance. Do you believe that this makes a difference? Others will always exist. Humans are feeble. Fear must be used to control them. No. Eleanor answered. Everyone within earshot could hear her voice. Reminding people of their strengths is necessary. Your frailty wasn't the only thing revealed tonight. It demonstrated the bravery of this community. Just before dawn, the parking lot at the hospital gradually cleared. Brutus remained behind, along with a few former gang members, assisting with cleanup while being watched by police. Their initial move toward atonement. Daniel was standing next to his mom, observing the dawn. Didn't you know this would occur? Not merely halting them, but changing them. Eleanor straightened her scrubs. She was getting ready for the rest of her shift. In the field of battlefield medicine, you gain knowledge that is significant. The deepest wounds aren't always physical. They are the ones who cause others to lose sight of their own power. Emily came by with an update and some new coffee. Eleanor. It's almost the end of the night shift, but you ought to see this, though. Employees in the hospital moved with renewed assurance. Patients and guests related their experiences resisting intimidation. It was a profoundly altered atmosphere. Something more powerful had taken the place of fear. Daniel said, "You know what happens next. This will be viewed as an opportunity by other organizations. Make an effort to move in. Fill the power vacuum." Eleanor grinned. Hours before, Viper had been unnerved by the same serene smile. Allow them to arrive. They will discover something unexpected. Not a single combative nurse, but a whole community that recognizes the value of solidarity. She went back inside to see how her patients were doing. Eleanor Harper was aware that this was not really the end. It was just the start. The night had demonstrated that force and violence were not the most effective means of overcoming fear. It was the bravery of solidarity. To put healing ahead of suffering. And to let everyone know that they may follow suit. At Haven Valley Memorial, the morning shift change seemed unique. Through windows now marked by the battle of the night, sunlight poured in. But there was a fundamental shift in the mood. Something more powerful had taken the place of fear. 4 windows are broken. 6 doors are broken. And 3 walls that are dented. During the emergency staff meeting, Dr. Wilson read from his tablet. Nevertheless, he smiled slightly as he looked up. Patient care never ceased. Not even for a second. Eleanor sat in silence. While others talked about what had happened that night, she finished her shift reports. Emily observed that her mentor's composed manner remained unchanged. In spite of all that had transpired. You never get enthusiastic, do you? Softly, she inquired. You just dismantled a whole criminal enterprise, after all. Eleanor continued her paperwork. In combat medicine, individuals are killed by excitement. We didn't take them down, anyway. The people in the community did. We simply demonstrated that they could. Outside, unanticipated volunteers assisted cleanup operations. Brutus led former Red Vipers members in fixing hospital property while sporting a normal outfit instead of his gang vest. Chief Davidson observed their endeavors with interest as a professional. I never imagined seeing this, he told Eleanor. Professional criminals performing voluntary community service. You can be surprised by people, Eleanor said. When you allow them to recollect their true selves. Daniel showed up with new intelligence. The FBI's operations are growing. They are dismantling similar organizations throughout the region using the evidence from last night. However, that isn't the fascinating aspect. He displayed his laptop to them, showcasing other municipalities' social media feeds. Communities sharing stories of standing up to intimidation. Hospitals implementing new security protocols. People refusing to pay protection money. It's like a chain reaction. Sarah observed, joining them. Everyone who sees what happened here realizes they don't have to live in fear anymore. Brutus approached their group, still awkward in his new role. Some of the boys, former Red Vipers, we've been talking. Thinking maybe we could use what we know. Help other towns deal with similar problems. Eleanor studied him thoughtfully. Redemption isn't just about stopping the wrong things. It's about starting to do the right ones. Inside the hospital, changes were already visible. Staff walked taller, spoke more confidently. Patients and visitors commented on the new atmosphere. Not just the physical security measures, but the sense of safety that came from a community united. Dr. Wilson called Eleanor to his office where local news crews waited outside. They want interviews, statements. This story's going national. No interviews, Eleanor replied firmly. This isn't about one person's actions. It's about what happens when people stop being afraid and start standing together. Emily burst in with urgent news. You need to see this. Other hospitals are calling, asking for advice. Not just about security. About building community support networks, training staff, creating response plans. Send them to Daniel, Eleanor directed. He can coordinate with Chief Davidson, develop a proper program. Throughout the day, more signs of change emerged. Local business owners removed the protection money from their books, openly defying any remaining criminal elements. Former victims came forward with evidence. No longer afraid of retaliation. Mom, Daniel called from his laptop. You've started something bigger than you realize. Federal task force is calling it the Haven Protocol. Using community unity to dismantle organized intimidation. Eleanor continued her rounds. Checking on patients with the same calm efficiency she'd always shown. As long as they understand the most important part. It's not about fighting. It's about standing together. Brutus and his group had finished basic repairs and were discussing plans with Chief Davidson. We know their methods, their hideouts, their whole system of control. Maybe it's time to use that knowledge to help instead of hurt. Redemption comes in many forms, Eleanor observed, passing by. Sometimes the best way to heal old wounds is to prevent new ones. Sarah organized a staff meeting to discuss implementation of new security protocols. But unlike before, these weren't based on fear and lockdowns. They focused on community involvement, mutual support, and rapid response networks. Eleanor taught us something important. She told the assembled staff. Security isn't just about keeping bad people out. It's about bringing good people together. As evening approached, Eleanor prepared for another night shift. The hospital halls buzzed with activity. Not from fear or tension, but from purpose and unity. You know what's remarkable? Emily said, falling into step beside her. Not just that we stood up to them, but how it's changed everyone. Even the most timid staff members are finding their courage. Daniel arrived with more updates. Other gangs are trying to move in, test the waters. But they're finding something they don't expect. People who aren't afraid anymore. Who know how to stand together. Let them come, Eleanor replied calmly, checking her patient charts. They'll learn the same lesson the Red Vipers did. Fear only works when people let it. Through the hospital windows, they could see Brutus and his group setting up a volunteer security patrol. Working alongside community members who days ago would have crossed the street to avoid them. Transformation comes in unexpected ways. Eleanor observed. Sometimes it takes a crisis to remind people of their own strength. Chief Davidson stopped by for a final update. Federal investigators want to know how we did it. How one hospital stood up to an entire criminal organization. Tell them the truth, Eleanor replied, preparing medications for her next patient. We didn't fight them with violence. We fought their fear. With unity. We showed people they had a choice. As night fell over Haven Valley Memorial, the atmosphere was transformed. Where once silence and fear had ruled after dark, now there was quiet confidence, purposeful activity, and the knowledge that no one stood alone. Eleanor Harper began her rounds, just as she had for years. But now each step carried new meaning, not just for her hospital or her town, but for every community that lived under the shadow of fear, waiting for someone to show them they could stand together and reclaim their strength. 1 week after the night that changed Haven Valley, Eleanor sat in the hospital cafeteria, watching Brutus and his reformed group escort an elderly patient to her car. Their motorcycles, once symbols of intimidation, now bore simple patches reading, "Community Guardians." "That's the third volunteer escort today," Emily commented, joining Eleanor with fresh coffee. "Hard to believe these are the same men who used to terrorize the parking lot." Eleanor continued writing her patient notes. "People rise to the expectations you set for them. Show them they can be protectors instead of predators, and some will choose the better path." The hospital itself had undergone subtle but significant changes. New security measures blended seamlessly with community involvement. Staff moved with quiet confidence, while patients and visitors commented on the atmosphere of safety. Daniel arrived with his laptop, displaying news from across the region. "Mom, you need to see this. 3 more towns have implemented what they're calling the Haven Protocol. Local communities organizing, standing together against intimidation. Any pushback?" Eleanor asked, reviewing the reports. "Some. Other organizations trying to fill the power vacuum. But they're finding it harder to establish fear when people know how to stand together." Chief Davidson joined their table, his face showing both satisfaction and concern. Federal task force finished their preliminary investigation. The Red Serpent's network was bigger than we thought. Corruption in local government, business fronts, connections to international crime. "And Viper?" Eleanor inquired, though her tone suggested she already knew. "Singing like a choir boy, trading information for considerations. His bosses, the ones who ordered the hospital attack. They're facing federal charges." Sarah rushed in, excitement breaking her usual professional demeanor. "Eleanor, you won't believe who just called. 3 major hospital associations want to implement your training program. They're calling it Community Integrated Security Protocol." Eleanor's expression remained calm. But those who knew her well caught the slight smile. "Send them to Daniel. This was never about one person or one hospital. It's about showing people they have the power to protect themselves." Outside, Brutus was organizing his group's patrol schedule. Former gang members worked alongside community volunteers. Their past rivalries forgotten in their new shared purpose. "Never thought I'd see the day," Dr. Wilson observed from his office window. "Ex-cons providing hospital security and doing a better job than any professional service we ever hired." "Because they're not just providing security," Eleanor replied. "They're finding redemption through service. There's a difference." Emily approached with a young nurse from another hospital sent to observe Haven Valley's changes. "Everyone wants to know how you did it," the visitor said. "How one nurse stood up to an entire criminal organization." "That's the wrong lesson," Eleanor corrected gently. "I didn't stand up to them. We all did. The moment people stopped being afraid, started working together. That's what changed everything." Daniel's laptop chimed with fresh intelligence. 2 more gangs testing boundaries in neighboring counties. "But look at this. Communities are responding differently. No fear, no isolation. They're using our playbook." Throughout the day, more signs of transformation emerged. Local businesses that had once paid protection money now contributed to community safety programs. Former victims became advocates, helping others find their courage. It's not just about physical security, Sarah explained to a group of visiting healthcare administrators. It's about changing the entire dynamic. When people know they're not alone, fear loses its power. Brutus approached Eleanor during her rounds, his massive frame somehow less intimidating in plain clothes. Some of the boys found out another organization's planning to move in, testing the waters, seeing if we've gone soft. And what did you tell them? Eleanor asked, though her slight smile suggested she knew the answer. Told them they'd find something different in Haven Valley now. Not just one tough nurse, but a whole community that remembers how to stand together. Chief Davidson brought reports of other towns requesting guidance. They want to know how to start, how to build the same kind of community response network. Tell them to start small, Eleanor advised. Build trust, show people they're stronger together than alone. The rest follows naturally. As evening approached, Eleanor watched the shift change from her usual spot. The night shift arrived without the fear that had once characterized after-dark operations. Instead, there was purpose, unity, and quiet strength. You know what the best part is, Emily observed. It's not just that we're safer. It's that everyone feels part of something bigger. Even the smallest acts of standing together matter now. Daniel showed her more updates from his network. Mom, remember how you said this wasn't just about one hospital or one town? Look at this. Communities across 3 states implementing similar programs. They're calling it a revolution in community-based security. Eleanor continued her rounds, checking on patients with the same careful attention she'd always shown. Revolution is the wrong word. This isn't about fighting or overthrowing. It's about remembering. Remembering that fear only works when we let it divide us. The sun set over Haven Valley Memorial, but unlike a week ago, darkness brought no tension. Community guardian bikes patrolled alongside police cruisers. Staff and patients moved freely, protected not just by security measures, but by the knowledge that an entire community stood ready to respond. Things will never be quite the same, will they? Sarah asked, watching the evening unfold. They shouldn't be, Eleanor replied, preparing for another night shift. Because now everyone knows something important. The strongest defense against fear isn't walls or weapons. It's people standing together, refusing to let intimidation rule their lives. As she walked the hospital corridors, Eleanor reflected on how much had changed in just 1 week. But more importantly, she thought about what hadn't changed. Her commitment to healing, to protecting, and to showing others that sometimes the quietest acts of courage could inspire the loudest responses to fear. 1 month after the night that transformed Haven Valley, Eleanor Harper stood at her usual spot by the nurse's station, updating patient charts. The hospital halls hummed with activity, but it was different now. Purposeful. Confident. Secure. Hard to believe it's only been a month, Emily said, joining her mentor. Sometimes it feels like a different hospital entirely. Through the windows they could see Brutus community guardians conducting their regular patrol. Their motorcycles gleamed in the morning sun, now symbols of protection rather than fear. Not different, Eleanor replied, checking a patient's vitals. Just reminded of what it always could be when people stand together. Daniel arrived with his morning briefing. The laptop screen displayed a map of the region, showing the spread of what media had dubbed the Haven Effect. Communities organizing, standing up to intimidation, reclaiming their streets. Federal task force numbers came in, he reported. Organized crime down 60% in areas implementing the protocol. Protection rackets collapsed in 12 cities. 3 major criminal organizations completely dismantled. Chief Davidson joined them, coffee in hand. Remember when we thought this was just about one gang causing trouble at one hospital? Now look at it. Entire communities transforming. Eleanor continued her rounds, her movements carrying the same quiet efficiency that had once served her in combat zones. Because people realized something important. Fear only works in isolation. Connection is stronger than intimidation. The emergency department doors opened, admitting a group of healthcare administrators from across the state. Sarah led them on what had become a regular tour, explaining the new integrated security measures. It's not just about physical protection, she explained. It's about creating an environment where everyone, staff, patients, visitors, feels part of something larger. Where helping each other becomes automatic. Brutus approached Eleanor during her lunch break, his massive frame now a comforting presence rather than an intimidating one. Got word about another outfit thinking of moving into the region, but something interesting happened. Oh. Eleanor's slight smile suggested she already knew. Local communities didn't wait for them to establish themselves. Soon as the first scouts showed up, they found people already organized, already standing together. They pulled out before even trying to set up. Throughout the day, more evidence of transformation emerged. The hospital cafe had become a community gathering spot, where former gang members sat alongside business owners they'd once extorted, planning neighborhood watch rotations. You know what really changed? Emily observed during afternoon rounds. It's not just that we're safer, it's that everyone feels responsible for keeping each other safe. Dr. Wilson called a staff meeting to discuss the hospital's expanding role. We're not just a medical facility anymore, he announced. We've become a model for community-integrated healthcare. Other hospitals are looking to us for guidance. Eleanor sat quietly during these discussions, preferring action to accolades, but she couldn't help noticing how her staff had grown, not just in confidence, but in their understanding of true strength. Mom, Daniel interrupted her thoughts with fresh intelligence. Remember how we worried other organizations would try to fill the power vacuum? Look at this. His laptop showed surveillance footage from nearby towns, attempted intimidation efforts failing as communities stood together, using the lessons learned from Haven Valley. The protocol works, he continued. Not because it's about fighting, but because it's about connecting. Every time they try to isolate people through fear, they find something stronger, people who remember how to stand together. Sarah brought reports from other hospitals implementing similar programs. They're all asking the same thing. How did one nurse inspire such change? I didn't, Eleanor corrected gently. The community inspired itself. Sometimes people just need to be reminded of their own strength. As evening approached, Brutus's group coordinated shift change with professional security and local police. The integration was seamless now, former adversaries working together to protect rather than intimidate. You know what the other chapters are saying? Brutus asked Eleanor during her evening rounds. They can't believe how much things have changed. Some of them are starting to ask questions about their own choices. Chief Davidson shared similar reports from law enforcement networks. It's like dominoes falling. Every community that stands up inspires others. The old system of control through fear, it's crumbling. Eleanor watched the night shift arrive, remembering how different it had felt just a month ago. Where fear had once ruled after dark, now there was calm purpose, shared responsibility, and quiet strength. You changed everything, Emily said softly, preparing for shift handover. No, Eleanor replied, checking one last patient chart. People changed themselves. They just needed to see it was possible. The sun set over Haven Valley Memorial, but darkness no longer brought tension. While personnel and guests roamed freely, protected not only by security measures but also by the knowledge that the entire community was prepared to respond, community guardian bikes patrolled alongside police cruisers. Before leaving for home, Daniel gave her last updates. The secret of how one hospital defied organized crime and sparked a regional revolution is one that other towns are eager to learn. As she got ready for another night shift, Eleanor grinned a little. Be honest with them. People simply remember that fear only works when we allow it to separate us, there is no secret. Community has always been stronger than intimidation. Eleanor considered how much had changed in just 1 month as she strolled through the well-known hallways. More significantly, though, she considered what had remained unchanged. Her dedication to protecting, healing, and demonstrating to others that even the most silent displays of bravery can elicit the most outspoken reactions to fear. Because that's what had changed Haven Valley in the end. A community's rediscovery of its own strength, rather than a single nurse's resistance to intimidation, was a lesson worth imparting, one town at a time. Haven Valley encountered its first significant obstacle 6 weeks after the Red Serpent's downfall. Black SUVs with its passengers making subtly obvious threats had been showing up at nearby establishments. A more advanced criminal group, the Steel Syndicate, was experimenting. During her routine shift, Eleanor observed the warning signs, heightened stress and patience from specific neighborhoods, as well as concerned murmurs among employees who resided in specific districts. Her decades-old battle reflexes were able to identify the patterns of organized intimidation. During their morning briefing, Daniel clarified that they were not the same as the Red Vipers. Surveillance photographs of men in fancy outfits were on his laptop. More corporate, they employ sophisticated coercion, financial pressure, and legal threats. Eleanor saw, however, that seclusion and intimidation were still being used out of fear when she went over patient charts. With a worried expression on his face, Brutus stormed inside the hospital break room. They came up to 3 of my guys, offered them money to switch sides, and offered to assist bring the valley back to order. And? Eleanor's eyes were interested, yet her speech was calm. They also instructed them to shove it. Brutus forced a somber smile. However, Miss Harper, these folks don't handle rejection well. Reports began to circulate throughout the day via the community network that had developed since the Red Vipers tragedy. Investment advisors visiting business owners, subtly threatening them with suggestions that seem reasonable, and applying pressure on influential members of the community. Chief Davidson acknowledged in an emergency meeting that they are more intelligent than Viper. No glaring offenses that we could easily prosecute. They are attempting to legally suffocate the neighborhood. Sarah brought together data from multiple departments. They have already purchased 3 sites close to the hospital while discussing administrative effectiveness and security contracts. With the same tactical awareness she had once used to evaluate events on the battlefield, Eleanor listened to the reports. They follow a routine, locate important infrastructure, create a genuine presence, and then gradually increase control. Daniel called his monitoring station, Mom. They own shell corporations that purchase foreclosed properties and have contacts with the local administration. Rather than using violence, they are attempting to seize power through papers. Emily hurried in with new information. Offers to sell their hospital stock were made to 2 board members. The figures are noteworthy. Eleanor got to her feet, attracting everyone's attention. Bring everyone together, not just the medical staff. Now is the time to demonstrate to the Steel Syndicate why their advanced strategy will also fail here. An odd combination of medical personnel, former gang members, business owners, and community leaders crowded the hospital cafeteria. With the same quiet authority that had earlier led combat medical groups, Eleanor spoke to them. She clarified that they believe they are more intelligent than the Red Vipers. Applying judicial pressure as an alternative to coercion. However, they are committing the same basic error. Assuming that community and connection are more powerful than fear and loneliness. The movements of the Steel Syndicate were reported by Brutus Group. Daniel provided information on their organizational structure. Chief Davidson listed the legal weaknesses. However, it was Sarah who brought out the most potent weapon in the community. Take a look at our creation. She pointed at the assembled assembly. Every effort to keep us apart only serves to strengthen our bond. Every danger strengthens our network. Eleanor described their plan of action. They expect resistance from law enforcement, from businesses. They don't expect an entire community working as one. Take a look at that for them. Over the next few days, the Steel Syndicate's sophisticated operation met unprecedented resistance. When they pressured businesses, they found united owners sharing resources and support. Legal threats were met with coordinated responses from community lawyers working pro bono. Their whole system depends on dividing people, Eleanor explained during a strategy session. On making each target feel alone and vulnerable. Show them that's impossible here. Brutus community guardians proved invaluable. Their street knowledge complementing Daniel's intelligence network. They spotted the Steel Syndicate's observers, tracked their movements, and demonstrated that Haven Valley was no longer vulnerable territory. You know what's really getting to them, Chief Davidson reported with satisfaction. They can't find anyone willing to be their local foothold. Every attempt to establish presence meets community resistance. The hospital stood as a symbol of this unity. When Steel Syndicate representatives attempted to arrange a meeting with the board, they found something unprecedented. Staff, patients, and community members, all aware and involved in protecting their healthcare system. It's not just about defending against threats anymore, Emily observed during evening rounds. It's about showing them a different kind of strength. Eleanor moved through her shift with characteristic calm, but her tactical mind never stopped assessing. They'll try something dramatic soon, she warned Daniel. Their sophisticated approach isn't working. They'll be tempted to fall back on cruder methods. As if confirming her prediction, black SUVs began congregating near the hospital. Men in expensive suits watched the facility, their frustration evident in their rigid postures. They're not used to this, Brutus reported after observing their movements. Their whole playbook is based on isolating targets. Can't do that when everyone's connected. Everyone's watching out for each other. Daniel's laptop chimed with urgent updates. Mom, they're calling in resources from other operations. Looks like they're planning something big. Good, Eleanor replied, surprising her listeners. Let them show everyone their true nature. The more they escalate, the more they prove what we've been saying. Their power only works when people are afraid and alone. Throughout the evening, tension built around the hospital. The Steel Syndicate's presence grew more obvious, their attempts at subtlety eroding with their frustration. You know what they don't you Andy? Understand? Eleanor asked during a quiet moment. In combat medicine, you learn something crucial. The strongest unit isn't the one with the most resources or the best weapons. It's the one where everyone looks out for each other. As night fell over Haven Valley Memorial, the community's response stood in stark contrast to the Steel Syndicate's pressure. Where they tried to create fear, they found unity. Where they attempted to isolate, they discovered connection. Their sophisticated operation faced something they hadn't encountered before, a community that remembered its strength and refused to forget again. The Steel Syndicate made their first significant move at dawn. A fleet of black SUVs surrounded Haven Valley Memorial, while men in expensive suits entered with documentation claiming to represent a healthcare management corporation. Hostile takeover attempt, Daniel explained, reviewing the papers. They've been quietly buying shares through shell companies. Now they're claiming enough ownership stake to force management changes. Eleanor continued her morning rounds, seemingly unconcerned by the corporate invasion. How many shares do they actually have? That's the interesting part, Sarah interrupted, rushing in with files. Remember all those community members who bought small stakes in the hospital after the Red Vipers incident? Turns out together they own more than 40%. The Steel Syndicate's lead representative, a sharp-featured man who introduced himself only as Mr. Gray, requested an immediate board meeting. He found the conference room already occupied, not just by hospital administration, but by a cross-section of the entire community. This is a closed meeting, Gray stated coldly. Shareholders and board members only. We are shareholders. Brutus stepped forward, producing his certificate. Around the room, dozens of others did the same. All of us. Small stakes, but together, we're the majority. Eleanor watched from the doorway as Gray's sophisticated facade cracked slightly. This is unprecedented. The documentation we have is incomplete, Daniel interrupted, his laptop displaying financial records. You assumed the hospital was vulnerable, isolated. Instead, you found a community that protects its own. Throughout the day, the Steel Syndicate's pressure increased. Their lawyers made threats. Their financial experts predicted doom. Their security personnel maintained a threatening presence, but they found something they hadn't encountered before. Coordinated resistance on every level. You know what they don't understand? Eleanor explained to Emily during a quiet moment. In combat medicine, you learn to recognize patterns of attack. They're using financial weapons instead of physical ones, but the principle is the same. They're trying to make people feel helpless. Chief Davidson arrived with updates from his contacts. They've tried this in other cities, buy up vulnerable infrastructure, install their own management, slowly take control of entire communities through legitimate-looking business practices. But it only works when people feel powerless, Eleanor observed, checking a patient's vital signs. When they believe they have to face these threats alone. The Steel Syndicate's frustration became evident as their sophisticated approach met unprecedented obstacles. When they threatened local businesses with litigation, they found a network of community lawyers ready to respond. When they tried to pressure individual board members, they discovered a united front. Miss Harper, Brutus approached during her afternoon rounds. They're starting to show cracks. 2 of their security teams just quit, said this job wasn't what they signed up for. Eleanor nodded slightly because they're used to intimidating isolated targets. Facing a united community challenges their whole worldview. Daniel's intelligence network tracked the organization's mounting frustration. Mom, they're calling in corporate raiders, professional union busters. They're not used to failing like this. Good, Eleanor replied, surprising him. Let them escalate. Every sophisticated threat they make, every corporate maneuver they attempt. It just shows everyone what they really are. The hospital staff had learned from the Red Vipers incident, where once they might have cowered before men in expensive suits wielding legal documents. Now they stood firm. Every department, every shift operated with quiet confidence and coordinated purpose. You've changed how people think about strength, Emily observed. Watching Eleanor handle yet another corporate confrontation with calm efficiency. They used to think it was about power, about control. And now, Eleanor asked, though her slight smile suggested she knew the answer. Now they understand it's about connection, about standing together. As evening approached, the Steel Syndicate's leadership gathered in the hospital parking lot, their frustration evident in heated discussions. Gray paced between the SUVs, his phone conversations becoming increasingly angry. Their superiors aren't happy, Daniel reported, monitoring communications. This was supposed to be a simple corporate takeover. Instead, they're facing community resistance they can't break through legal means. Eleanor watched the scene with tactical awareness, which means they'll be tempted to abandon sophisticated methods, fall back on cruder approaches. Chief Davidson shared similar concerns. God word they're calling in less legitimate resources, people who solve problems outside the law. Let them, Eleanor replied calmly. The more they escalate, the more they prove what we've been saying. Their power, whether it wears a suit or carries a weapon, depends on making people feel afraid and alone. Throughout the evening, tension built as the Steel Syndicate's corporate facade began to crack. Their lawyers' threats became less subtle, their security personnel more openly aggressive, but they found the hospital changed from the vulnerable target they'd expected. Brutus's community guardians maintained a visible presence, working alongside hospital security and local police. Staff moved with quiet confidence, supporting each other and sharing information through their now well-established network. You know what really frustrates them? Sarah asked during shift change. They can't find anyone willing to be their inside connection. No one they can turn, no one they can isolate. Eleanor continued her rounds with characteristic calm, but her combat-trained senses remained alert. They'll try something dramatic soon. Organizations like this can't accept failure. It challenges their entire system of control. As night fell over Haven Valley Memorial, the Steel Syndicate's vehicles remained in the parking lot, their occupants watching with increasing desperation. But inside the hospital, staff and community members moved with purpose and unity, demonstrating a kind of strength that no amount of corporate intimidation could break. The Steel Syndicate's transformation from corporate predators to outright aggressors happened at midnight. Their suits disappeared, replaced by tactical gear. Professional enforcers emerged from the SUVs, their movements betraying military training. Eleanor noticed the change immediately. "Daniel, what are we looking at?" "Private military contractors," he replied, studying surveillance feeds. "Ex-special forces, mercenaries, they're done playing by corporate rules." Through the hospital windows, they watched Gray coordinate with his new assets. The businessman's polished facade had cracked, revealing something darker beneath. "They've got a reputation," Chief Davidson reported grimly. "When legal pressure fails, they bring in these teams. Usually ends with communities giving in just to stop the violence." Eleanor continued her rounds, but her movements had shifted subtly. Combat muscle memory, dormant during peaceful times, reawakened as she assessed tactical positions and defensive options. "They're surrounding all exits," Brutus reported, his community guardians monitoring the situation. "Professional setup reminds me of military operations." "Because that's exactly what it is," Eleanor replied. "They're treating the hospital like a target using standard tactical approaches, but they're making the same mistake as the Red Vipers, assuming we're unprepared." The first probing attacks came at 2 a.m. Small teams testing security, evaluating response times, looking for weaknesses. But instead of finding a vulnerable hospital, they encountered organized resistance at every turn. Multiple teams converging. Daniel's voice crackled over the radio network. "They're coordinating through military-grade communications. This isn't street thugs anymore." Eleanor moved through the hospital corridors, positioning defenders with combat-learned precision. "They expect chaos, panic, show them something different." The enforcers' first serious push came through the emergency department. 6 men in tactical gear moving with professional coordination. They found Sarah waiting with her staff, all traces of fear replaced by determined resolve. "This is a hospital," she stated firmly. "Whatever you're planning, remember that. Every action, every consequence, it's all being recorded." The team leader hesitated, his training conflicting with the unexpected resistance. Before he could decide, Eleanor's voice carried from the shadows. "Interesting choice," she observed, stepping into view. "Ex-military, probably special operations, now working as corporate enforcers. Quite a career change." The leader's eyes narrowed. "You know nothing about us." 25 years Special Forces Combat Medicine, Eleanor replied calmly. "I've treated men like you in war zones across 3 continents. The question is, are you really ready to attack a hospital to become the kind of people you'd probably join the military to fight against?" Throughout the facility, similar scenes played out. Professional enforcers found their tactical advantages negated by preparation and unity. Brutus's group, understanding both sides of intimidation, proved particularly effective at disrupting their operations. "They're getting frustrated," Daniel reported, monitoring communications. "Their whole approach depends on overwhelming force and fear. Neither is working." Gray's voice carried across the parking lot. "All pretense of corporate sophistication gone. Take control of the building. Show them what happens when communities don't cooperate." But the Steel Syndicate's enforcers faced something they hadn't encountered before. Every aggressive move was met with organized response. Every attempt at intimidation found people standing together instead of cowering alone. "You know what they don't understand?" Eleanor explained to Emily during a brief lull. "In combat, the strongest unit isn't the one with the best weapons or tactics. It's the one where everyone looks out for each other." Chief Davidson coordinated with his officers, maintaining a perimeter while gathering evidence. "Federal task force is building a case." Every action they take tonight just adds to it. The enforcers' frustration became evident as their professional tactics failed to achieve results. Their training assumed targets would break under pressure, would choose safety over resistance. Instead, they found a community that had learned to stand together. Miss Harper, Brutus approached with urgent news. They're calling in more teams. Looks like they're planning something big. Eleanor nodded slightly. They have to. Their whole system of control depends on it. If word gets out that communities can resist even their professional enforcers. Daniel's laptop displayed mounting evidence of the Steel Syndicate's desperation. Mom, their corporate structure is starting to crack. Other operations are watching this failure, starting to question the organization's methods. Throughout the night, the pressure increased. More tactical teams arrived, their movements becoming less professional and more aggressive as frustration mounted. But the hospital staff had learned from previous confrontations, had prepared for exactly this scenario. Remember, Eleanor's voice carried through the radio network. They expect fear, chaos, isolation. Show them something different. Show them what happens when people stand together. Gray paced between his vehicles, barking orders into multiple phones. His corporate veneer had completely dissolved, revealing the true nature of his organization's power. Not sophisticated business practices, but the same crude intimidation as any street gang. They're going to try something desperate. Eleanor warned, watching his deteriorating control. Organizations like this can't accept failure. It challenges their entire system of power. As dawn approached, tension built throughout the facility. The Steel Syndicate's enforcers grouped for what looked like a final push, their professional discipline fraying under mounting frustration. You know what really bothers them? Brutus observed, watching their movements. They're used to being the scariest thing people have faced. Now they're finding out that fear loses its power when people stand together. Eleanor continued her rounds with combat-trained awareness, noting defensive positions and coordination points. The hospital hummed with purposeful activity, not panic or fear, but the determined unity of people protecting what mattered. They'll make their move soon, she told her assembled defenders. When they do, remember, we're not just protecting a building. We're showing every community they've terrorized that resistance is possible. That fear only works when people let it. The sun began to rise over Haven Valley Memorial, casting long shadows across the parking lot full of tactical vehicles. Inside, staff and community members moved with quiet confidence, preparing to show the Steel Syndicate that even their professional enforcers couldn't break a community that had learned to stand together. The Steel Syndicate's final assault began at sunrise. Their professional enforcers moved in synchronized teams using tactics meant for war zones rather than hospitals. Gray's voice crackled over their radio network. Take the building, whatever it takes. Eleanor watched through security feeds, her combat experience recognizing their approach. Multiple entry points, coordinated breach attempts, they're done playing corporate games. The first team hit the emergency department with military precision. Smoke grenades rolled across the floor, tactical lights piercing the haze. But instead of chaos and panic, they found prepared defenders. Remember your training, Eleanor's voice carried through the hospital's communication system. They expect fear and isolation, show them something different. Daniel coordinated from his command position, tracking enemy movements. 3 teams breaching west entrance, 2 more coming through loading dock. Mom, these guys are serious. Combat veterans, special operations background. So am I, Eleanor replied calmly, moving through the corridors with combat-learned efficiency. And we have something they don't, people who know what they're protecting. The enforcers' first push met unexpected resistance. Brutus community guardians, understanding both sides of intimidation, disrupted their tactical formations. Hospital staff implemented security protocols with practiced precision. They're getting frustrated, Chief Davidson reported, monitoring the situation. Professional operators hate when targets don't react according to plan. Gray's voice carried from outside, all pretense of corporate authority replaced by raw anger. I want that nurse, find her, show everyone what happens when they defy us. But Eleanor was already moving, positioning defenders with combat-honed instincts. Sarah, secure the critical care unit. Emily, implement Protocol 7. They think they're attacking a soft target. Let's show them how wrong they are. The first serious casualties arrived as enforcers tried forcing their way through barricaded entrances. 2 of Gray's men suffered injuries from their own aggressive tactics, finding themselves being treated by the very staff they'd come to intimidate. Standard treatment protocols, Eleanor instructed her team while bandaging a wounded enforcer. We're healthcare workers first, no matter who they are. The injured man stared at her in confusion. Why are you helping us? Because that's what we do, Eleanor replied, securing the bandage. The question is, why are you trying to hurt people who save lives? Throughout the hospital, similar scenes played out. Professional enforcers, expecting to find helpless civilians, instead encountered organized resistance at every turn. Their tactical advantages meant little against people united in protecting their community. Mom, Daniel's voice carried urgency. They're calling in their final reserves. Gray's ordered them to succeed at any cost. His superiors are watching. If they fail here, their whole system starts to crumble, Eleanor finished. Good, let them show everyone their true nature. The next wave hit with increased violence. Enforcers abandoned professional restraint, their frustration making them sloppy. But the hospital staff had prepared for this, had trained for exactly this scenario. Remember, Eleanor's voice steadied her defenders. They're used to people breaking under pressure. Show them what happens when people stand together instead. Brutus coordinated his group's response, their past experience with violence now serving to protect. Rather than intimidate, Miss Harper, they're getting desperate. Gray's ordered them to take hostages if necessary. Eleanor's expression hardened slightly. That's not happening in my hospital. The confrontation reached its peak as Gray himself entered the building, surrounded by his most hardened enforcers. Their movement spoke of military training twisted to mercenary purposes. Find her. Gray's composed facade had completely shattered. Bring me the nurse who thinks she can stop an entire organization. But as his teams pushed deeper into the hospital, they found something unprecedented. Every department, every corridor held determined defenders. Staff and community members worked in coordinated unity, turning the building's layout against the invaders. You know what they don't understand? Eleanor explained while treating another injured enforcer. In combat medicine, you learn that the strongest defense isn't weapons or tactics. It's people protecting what matters to them. Daniel's surveillance showed the Steel Syndicate's formation breaking down. Professional operators hesitated, their training conflicting with orders to attack healthcare workers. Some simply walked away, unwilling to cross that line. They're fracturing, Chief Davidson observed. Gray's lost control. His own people are starting to question their roles in this. Through the chaos, Eleanor moved with practiced efficiency. Her combat experience guiding every action. She found Gray cornered in the pediatric ward, his remaining enforcers facing United Hospital staff. It's over, she stated calmly. Your professional operators are standing down. Your corporate backers are distancing themselves. All you've done is show everyone what your organization really is. Gray's response was explosive. He pulled a weapon, desperation overriding judgment. You think this stops with one hospital? We control entire regions. No one stands against us. Look around, Eleanor replied. Her voice carrying the authority of someone who'd faced worse threats in war zones. Everyone is standing against you. Your power only worked when people were afraid and alone. That ended tonight. As police sirens approached and more enforcers abandoned their posts, the Steel Syndicate's last attempt at control crumbled. Gray faced not just tactical defeat, but the complete failure of his organization's core strategy. "You don't understand," he snarled. Weapon shaking. "We're supposed to be unstoppable. Communities aren't supposed to fight back." Eleanor stepped forward, her movements measured. "That's exactly what we want you to understand. Fear only works when people let it, and Haven Valley is done being afraid." Dawn broke over Haven Valley Memorial as Gray faced the culmination of his organization's failure. His weapon trembled between Eleanor and the assembled hospital staff, desperation making him more dangerous than any professional enforcer. "One nurse," he spat, his corporate mask completely shattered. "One elderly nurse destroyed everything we built. Do you have any idea what they'll do to me when this gets out?" Eleanor maintained her calm, combat-trained eyes, noting every detail of his deteriorating control. "You did this to yourself. The moment you decided intimidation was better than cooperation, this became inevitable." Through the hospital windows, they could see more enforcers departing, their professional discipline finally overriding mercenary loyalty. Brutus's community guardians secured exits while Daniel coordinated with arriving federal agents. "Your entire operation is exposed." Daniel's voice carried from the doorway, laptop displaying evidence streams. "Not just here, everywhere. Other communities are already standing up following Haven Valley's example." Gray's laugh held an edge of hysteria. "You think this ends with us? There will always be others. Organizations that understand power comes from making people afraid." "No," Eleanor replied, taking another measured step forward. "You never understood real power. It's not about making people afraid. It's about helping them remember their strength." Throughout the hospital, staff and community members held their positions with quiet determination. The Steel Syndicate's sophisticated tactics had failed against something they hadn't calculated for. Unified resistance from people protecting what mattered to them. "Mom," Daniel reported urgently. "Federal task force is moving on their other operations. The whole network is collapsing. Gray's superiors are already being arrested." Gray's composure finally broke completely. His weapon swung wildly between targets as he backed toward the pediatric ward. "Stay back. I'll show everyone what happens when they defy us." But Eleanor had faced worse threats in combat zones. Her movements were precise, efficient. Years of battlefield experience channeled into one fluid response. Before Gray could act, he found himself disarmed and subdued. His own tactical training used against him. Pressure points and joint manipulation, Eleanor explained professionally while securing him. Combat medicine teaches you every way the human body can break. Not to cause harm, but sometimes to prevent it. Chief Davidson arrived with federal agents, their expressions showing impressed respect. "Eleanor, you've given us everything we needed. The Steel Syndicate's entire operation, their connection to legitimate businesses, their whole system of control." The guards of Brutus's community had turned into educators, instructing other communities on how to turn troublemakers into community defenders. During a pause between sessions, Brutus said, "I never imagined I'd be teaching law enforcement. However, Miss Harper demonstrated that to us. Instead of harming, everyone has the ability to defend." From his enlarged command center, where he now received questions from all around the country, Daniel coordinated. "Federal task force reports have arrived, Mom. 3 other groups, such as the Steel Syndicate, are attempting the same corporate takeover strategy in other areas, but they are discovering that local populations are already ready and united." Eleanor refused to allow the national spotlight get in the way of her normal shifts and patient care. Retaliation is not the most crucial lesson. During rounds, she informed Emily. It's about remaining strong and connected to avoid having to battle. Evidence of more significant alterations surfaced during the day. Following Brutus's lead, former Steel Syndicate enforcers started collaborating with police enforcement to reveal comparable activities. Owners of businesses discussed how to stand together against corporate intimidation. As he observed another training session, Chief Davidson remarked, "You've started a revolution. With something they can't resist, not with force or bloodshed." Individuals recalling their own power. Sarah oversaw the hospital's growth, striking a balance between providing standard medical care and its new function as a national training facility. She told guests that every department has something to teach. The same idea underlies everything from community outreach to emergency response. Hurting is weaker than healing. A group of government officials arrived in the afternoon, keen to learn more about the Haven Protocol. They discovered Eleanor taking care of patients as usual, quietly and effectively. One official declared, "We're getting ready to roll out your strategies across the country. Community protection training will be standardized through the Harper Initiative." Eleanor glanced up from her charts of patients. "Just keep in mind the most crucial aspect. The goal is not to produce defenders. The goal is to remind people that they are not alone in facing dangers." Brutus's organization has grown, adding reformed individuals from other groups. Instead of being a sign of intimidation, their motorcycle patrols now represented safety. Rather than causing terror, their presence brings peace. "What irritates me the most?" Brutus asked in a hushed tone. "Observing other men who, like us, used to threaten people but are now learning how to keep them safe. That is a true shift." Daniel's intelligence network monitored the nationwide repercussions. Communities are coming together, exchanging knowledge, and supporting one another. Every time another group attempts to use fear to gain control, they discover something new. Emily arranged the hospital's expanding success story database. She told visiting colleagues that it's not simply about preventing threats. It's about changing how communities react to intimidation and how they view themselves. Eleanor was in the hospital garden as darkness drew near, enjoying a rare opportunity for introspection. As she saw another group of visiting officials leave, Dr. Wilson joined her. He continued carefully, "I knew your combat experience would be valuable when I hired you. I never thought it would contribute to the transformation of community healthcare nationwide." Eleanor smiled with the same serene assurance that had defeated smart enterprises and vicious gangs. Combat medicine teaches you something very important. The unit with the finest tactics or weaponry is not the strongest. It is the one in which everyone looks out for one another. Brutus spoke to law enforcement representatives from 3 states as the day's last training session came to an end. Once intended to intimidate, his enormous frame now inspired respect for other reasons. He addressed his audience, "Ms. Harper taught us the most important lesson. Creating fear in others is not a sign of true strength. It's about supporting their collective bravery." Staff members went throughout the hospital with the peaceful assurance of those who understood their value, their relationship to one another, and their part in something greater than themselves. What actually changed, do you know? Sarah watched as the shift changed. "We are safer, but that's not all. It's because we stand together that everyone knows why we're safer." Eleanor got ready for another shift as the Haven Valley Memorial began to darken. Her core aim remained unaltered by the national attention, federal programs, or visiting authorities. As they started their rounds, she said to Emily, "They want to know the secret. However, there isn't. People are simply recalling what they have always known. Fear only works when we allow it to separate us." With its new dual mission of healing the sick and educating others on how to repair their communities, the hospital hummed. Everyone contributed to demonstrating that the best defense against fear was not force or sophistication but rather people standing together and refusing to be separated. In the midst of all of this, Eleanor Harper carried on with her duties with the same taciturn effectiveness that had previously helped her in battle areas. Because she knew what groups like the Steel Syndicate and others could never understand. True strength came from connecting through courage rather than controlling via fear. The first formal federal training program was held at Haven Valley Memorial 1 month after the Steel Syndicate's defeat. The renovated conference center was packed with law enforcement officers, community leaders, and healthcare administrators from all across the nation who were anxious to learn about what they termed the Harper Method. Eleanor told the gathered crowd, "You're missing the point," with the same cool authority that had defeated corporate enforcers and street bullies alike. Remembering what communities already know, that fear only works when people are isolated, is more important than strategies or procedures. The hospital was remarkably effective at adjusting to its dual mission. Every department was now a living example of community-integrated protection, even as standard healthcare proceeded unabated. Sarah led a group of visiting administrators on emergency response procedures. However, make sure they comprehend these procedures because everyone stands together and participates. Brutus's protectors from the neighborhood had grown into a training force for the region. Former intimidators now provided special insight into averting violence by teaching others how to preserve their prior experiences. Brutus told a group of ex-gang members from another state that Miss Harper had shown them something significant. Fear-based power isn't really power, true strength comes from uniting and defending what's important. Daniel coordinated from his upgraded command center, which is now a central location for exchanging national intelligence. "We're already seeing benefits, Mom. Just last week, 3 attempts for organizational takeover were thwarted. Communities are coming together, exchanging information, and taking a united stance." Evidence of systematic change surfaced throughout the day. Hospitals across reported putting similar strategies into place. Law enforcement organizations changed their strategies to prioritize community engagement over conflict. People's perceptions of security have been altered by you. Another training session was watched by Chief Davidson. Today, preventing threats by unity is more important than only defending against them. Emily set up hands-on activities to demonstrate guests how the Haven Valley has changed. She clarified that the bodily changes are important. They are not the core, though. The true shift is in how individuals view themselves and their relationships with one another. Eleanor refused to let her status as a national celebrity get in the way of her providing patient care, so she kept working her usual shifts. "In combat medicine, you learn that the best defense isn't your weapon or your training," she said to a federal official who was impressed. "It's the individual standing next to you." The first test of the enlarged system was conducted in the afternoon. An advanced criminal group made an effort to get established in a nearby town. They discovered something new. Already, communities are united and connected. Following the unsuccessful operation, Daniel reported that this was the true triumph. They were unable to locate any single targets. Every intimidation attempt was met with united opposition. Where there had previously been only threats, Brutus's group collaborated with other reformed organizations to establish a network of protectors. He acknowledged that he used to believe that being strong meant frightening people. "We get it now. It's about supporting their collective bravery." Sarah oversaw the hospital's expanding success story database. She told guests that every community seeks its own path. However, the idea is still the same. Intimidation is always defeated by connection. Eleanor discovered a peaceful spot in the hospital garden as darkness drew near. As she saw another batch of trainees leave with fresh insights, Dr. Wilson joined her. He remarked, "I thought we were just protecting one hospital when all this started. I never thought we'd be introducing the country to a fresh perspective on neighborhood safety." The wisdom of someone who had witnessed both the best and the worst of human nature was evident in Eleanor's smile. "You learn something important in combat zones. The best defenses aren't often found in the strongest communities. They are the ones who make people realize how interconnected they are." A hands-on demonstration marked the end of the day's last class. While medical workers showed how ordinary people could unite against complex challenges, Brutus's squad illustrated how former adversaries could become defenders. Eleanor informed the leaving trainees that tactics and techniques aren't the most important learning. It's important to keep in mind that when people refuse to be divided, fear loses its power. Staff members went throughout the hospital with the peaceful assurance of those who understood their value, their relationship to one another, and their part in something greater than themselves. Do you know what makes a big difference? During evening rounds, Emily made observations. We educate them more than just self-defense techniques. We demonstrate to them that they were never truly defenseless. Eleanor got ready for another shift as the Haven Valley Memorial began to darken. None of the federal initiatives, national programs, or visiting authorities altered her core mission. As they went over patient charts, she informed Sarah, "They want to replicate our success. However, people must realize that we didn't invent anything. We merely served to remind them of what they already knew, that no threat can defeat unity." Healing the sick while teaching others to heal their communities was the hospital's ongoing purpose. Everyone contributed to demonstrating that the best defense against fear was not force or sophistication but rather people standing together and refusing to be separated. In the middle of it all, Eleanor Harper carried on with the same calm effectiveness that had helped her in battle zones because she knew what others were only now realizing, that genuine strength was about connecting through courage rather than controlling through fear. The full extent of Haven Valley's impact was revealed 6 weeks after the Steel Syndicate was vanquished. Daniel's command center received reports of communities rising up, organizations collapsing, and decades of fear-based control eroding in the face of united opposition. Just this morning, there have been 3 additional success stories. Daniel covered Pittsburgh, Denver, and Atlanta during the daily briefing. Using our techniques, communities unite against corporate and street-level dangers. Despite demands for interviews from the national media, Eleanor carried on with her rounds with her usual intensity. In a quiet time, she informed Emily, "The attention misses the point. One facility or one nurse was never the focus of this. People need to remember their own power." The hospital was no longer just a place to receive medical care. Every department demonstrated to guests how cooperation might overcome even highly skilled intimidation by acting as a real-life example of community-integrated protection. Sarah told another set of administrators that while the physical modifications are important, they are only tools. The true change is in how individuals view themselves and their relationships with one another. The guards of Brutus's community had become something extraordinary. Now, former intimidators made nationwide trips to teach other reformed groups how to defend rather than threaten. The most crucial lesson was imparted to us by Miss Harper. Brutus spoke to a group of law enforcement and ex-gang members. Real power is about empowering others to be brave together, not about instilling fear in them. However, success also brought with it new difficulties. As their control strategies failed across the country, sophisticated groups started focusing on Haven Valley specifically. They sought to undermine the concept and demonstrate that community cohesion was insufficient to overcome resolute opposition. Chief Davidson cautioned during an emergency meeting that they are approaching us in a different way, not through corporate techniques or violence. They are attempting to undermine the community's self-confidence. With the same tactical awareness that had helped her in battle zones, Eleanor listened to the reports. They have yet to comprehend. When trust is based on genuine connection, it cannot be broken from the outside. Evidence of their new predicament surfaced throughout the day. An anonymous tip aims to sow distrust among neighbors. Corporate rumors that cast doubt on the hospital's practices. Attempts to sow discord amongst erstwhile rivals who are now cooperating. Daniel, who was following the coordinated activities, noted that they believe they are being cunning by employing advanced psychological warfare in place of direct conflict. Haven Valley, however, had learned its lesson. Every effort to sow discord was greeted with greater solidarity. Every attempt to foment mistrust simply served to remind people of their unity. While attending to a patient, Eleanor said, "You know what they don't understand. Combat medicine teaches you something very important. Building trust under duress and putting it to the test makes it unbreakable." Brutus's team was under extra strain. They became targets for those attempting to expose the model's flaws because of their change from intimidators to guardians. They never stop attempting to entice us back. During an evening patrol, Brutus acknowledged that they don't understand the offers of money, power, and opportunities to go back to our former ways. We discovered something more powerful than fear. Every day, the hospital workers showed their tenacity. Quiet solidarity reacted to attempts to incite internal strife. People stood closer together in an attempt to erode their confidence. That's what irritates them the most. Emily watched as the shift changed. They are unable to break what they have never comprehended. Instead of fear, the connection is founded on a common goal. Eleanor was getting ready for the night shift as the shadows grew longer above Haven Valley Memorial. There were rumors that their rivals were preparing a big move. A concerted effort to demonstrate that togetherness might nonetheless be defeated by fear. Eleanor told her gathering crew to give it a shot. Their actions only served to support our claims. Only when people were terrified did their power operate. And by themselves. When we decided to stand together, that was the end of it. The region's increasing strain was monitored by Daniel's intelligence network. Similar difficulties were encountered by other communities who adopted the Haven model. However, something unexpected was taking place. Their unity only became greater with each assault. They can't oppose what you've made. Observing yet another failed attempt to split the community, Chief Davidson made a comment. Not with force, not with cash, not with cunning deception. More proof of their opponent's annoyance surfaced throughout the evening. Their deliberate attempts to sow discord repeatedly turned into acts of solidarity. Their attempts to demonstrate. The model's shortcomings only served to highlight its advantages. During late rounds, Sarah said, "It's ironic that they're really assisting us. Every attack serves as a reminder of our unity." Eleanor's fight-trained awareness carried her through her shift, pointing out how overcoming threats as a community had strengthened it. The lessons they had learned had only been strengthened by every obstacle and every effort to sever their union. "You learn that the strongest bonds aren't created in peace," she told a young nurse who was concerned about the increasing strain in war zones. "They are shaped by hardships, put to the test, and demonstrated by sticking together when it would have been simpler to do otherwise." According to accounts, their opponents were beginning to realize something important as midnight drew near. Once a society had demonstrated its trustworthiness via deeds rather than words, they couldn't undermine it. "You know what's truly amazing?" Brutus inquired on his last patrol. "Since they comprehend fear, they continue to believe that it is stronger than unity. What they don't understand, they can't combat." By curing the ill and teaching others how to repair their communities, the hospital carried out its dual aim. Every department and individual showed that the best defense against sophisticated manipulation was not resistance or counter-strategies, but rather individuals staying together and refusing to be split. In the midst of all of this, Eleanor Harper carried on with her work with the same taciturn effectiveness that had helped her in combat zones. She recognized that genuine strength was about connecting via a common goal and established trust, not about controlling through intimidation or deception, as their opponents were gradually starting to realize. The final test for Haven Valley came 2 months after the collapse of the Steel Syndicate. Desperate to demonstrate that community cohesion could be disrupted, a coalition of organizations mounted their most advanced strike to date, using carefully manufactured doubt rather than violence or threats. Daniel said that his command center was monitoring several activities and that they were aiming for everything. Corporate interests claiming that the hospital's approach puts patients at risk, anonymous individuals propagating falsehoods, and social media campaigns casting doubt on our procedures. Despite rumors and doubts throughout the neighborhood, Eleanor went about her rounds with her usual composure. "You learn in combat medicine that the most dangerous attacks aren't always the obvious ones," she said to her staff. The hospital was the focal point of a well-planned campaign. Their security procedures were questioned by experts. Their community-integrated strategy was shaky, according to corporate advisors. Every accomplishment was reframed as a possible drawback. "They are attempting to cast doubt on us." At an emergency staff meeting, Sarah noted, "Make us question everything we've built." Particular emphasis was placed on Brutus's community protectors. Their transition from threats to defenders became the subject of doubtful inquiries and sharp queries on the validity of redemption. Brutus, Miss Harper, came up on the nightly patrol. They are trying to rekindle fear of us by bringing up our pasts, but they don't get it. Because we made the decision to be better, we are no longer who we were. Evidence of their opponent's clever strategy grew throughout the day. Every department had to deal with well-crafted obstacles meant to cause conflict within the organization. Every bond they forged during their metamorphosis was scrutinized. Physical treatment is not the same as this. They're attacking the trust that makes everything work, Chief Davidson cautioned. Attempting to demonstrate that unity is weaker than fear. With the same tactical awareness that had helped her in combat zones, Eleanor listened to the reports. The most crucial lesson is still beyond their comprehension. Action-based trust that is put to the test by obstacles becomes unbreakable. The scope of the coordinated activities was monitored by Daniel's intelligence network. This isn't just about discrediting us, Mom. They are attempting to demonstrate the flaws in the community resistance paradigm as a whole. Other towns may lose faith if they are able to destroy the cohesiveness of Haven Valley. As media sources started publishing articles casting doubt on the Haven miracle, the pressure increased. The community's metamorphosis, according to professional doubters, was short-lived, brittle, and certain to crumble when put under actual pressure. What do they not see, do you know? In a quiet moment in between shifts, Emily asked. Every assault and effort to cast doubt on us serves just to serve as a reminder of our unity. Eleanor carried out her responsibilities with combat-trained accuracy, seeing how her employees approached every task with increasing assurance. Attempts to sow discord only serve to deepen their bonds. Their conviction is reinforced by attempts to create doubt. You learn that the strongest unit isn't the one that has never been tested, she told a concerned administrator about war zones. It's the one that has shown its trust by working through difficulties together. Every day, Brutus's squad showed off how they had changed. Every charge pertaining to their history turned into a chance to demonstrate their chosen identity. Every attempt to doubt their atonement was met with more convincing evidence of their dedication. Brutus warned his troops, they keep trying to remind people who we were. However, all they're doing is pointing out our current state. We learned that from Miss Harper. Forgetting the past is not the goal of true change. It's a matter of selecting an alternative future. Reports suggested their opponents were becoming increasingly irritated as darkness drew near. Their cunning plan to undermine community trust kept turning into evidence of its power. Unity's durability was demonstrated in every attempt to expose its flaws. During shift change, Sarah said, "It's ironic that they're actually strengthening us. Every obstacle just serves to validate our claims. Fear is always defeated by connection." The growing proof of their opponent's realization was monitored by Daniel's network. Their deliberate attempts to sow uncertainty were backfiring. As communities around the nation witnessed this organized attack on Haven Valley, their own resolve grew stronger. Chief Davidson said, "You've made something they can't break. Not with money, not with violence, not even with uncertainty. As it's based on a concept they don't comprehend. Actions demonstrate trust." The hospital carried out its purpose all night long, with each department showcasing why community integration had evolved beyond a mere security measure. It was a tried-and-true method for creating enduring bonds. As yet another round of criticism shattered their cohesiveness, Eleanor reminded her workers to remember. Since they are familiar with fear, they believe it to be more powerful than trust. What they don't understand, they can't combat. According to reports, their opponents were confronted with an unexpected reality as midnight drew near. Once a community's religion had been established by common struggles and deliberate changes, they couldn't destroy it. With the same quiet efficiency that had carried her through decades of war medicine, Eleanor Harper carried on with her work in the center of it all. Because she knew what their rivals were finally starting to realize. Its genuine power lay in demonstrating to others why they might have faith in their relationship, not in making them doubt themselves or one another. Eleanor Harper stood in the hospital garden 3 months after the night that transformed Haven Valley, watching the sunrise softly tint the sky. The advanced attacks had been thwarted, the questions had been addressed, and something extraordinary had surfaced. Not simply a community that has changed, but also a fresh perspective on what real power is. Do you know what actually broke them? Emily joined her for their regular morning coffee when she asked. Though things were helpful, it wasn't our solidarity or resistance. It was demonstrating to everyone that their power was a myth. There was indications of lasting alteration everywhere throughout the facility. Because of their established trust, the staff moved with quiet confidence. Former rivals collaborated, their same goal outlasting their differences. The results of choosing connection over fear were shown in every field. The final assessment was completed by the Government Task Committee. With his command center now a permanent feature, Daniel reported. Not only are hospitals, schools, and companies adopting the Haven model, but entire communities are also learning to unite. Nobody could have expected the rise to prominence of Brutus community guardians. Similar changes were sparked nationwide by their example of redemption via service. Former intimidators learned how they might truly make a difference, protect, and heal. Brutus came over with his most recent report, Ms. Harper. You mentioned that everyone is capable of making a better decision. Do you recall that? You showed us what was possible, even though we didn't believe it at the time. News of their triumph was brought in by Chief Davidson. Once communities realized how strong they were, the groups that had attempted to undermine their unity via deception and deceit were unable to keep control. During the morning briefing, he explained that it's spreading. Every community that takes a position motivates others. The outdated systems of isolation and fear simply no longer function. What's exceptional, you know? During midday rounds, Emily made observations.
Disclaimer. This channel stands against all forms of intolerance, discrimination, racism, and violations of human rights. The stories shared here are original creations, developed to encourage reflection, understanding, and constructive dialogue. All content is produced with a commitment to respecting diversity and honoring human dignity.